I have so much I want to talk about on this topic. I feel like this has come up with so many clients over the course of the years I've been in business, but definitely lately too. So I feel like it's really important to have this conversation. Yay. Hey, Julie. Hey, Morgana. Hey, Amanda. Thank you for being here. I'm so happy to have you all. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about why I think this comes up so much, what we can do about it. And the thing that's so cool about this one in particular is like, it's definitely a mindset thing, but there's so much practicality we can add around it. So I want to talk about that too, where it's not just one of those things of like, oh, just shift your mindset, but there's like very practical ways I think you can implement this in your business. Um, so we'll dive in there too. Hey, Madeline, thank you for being here. Okay, so as always, we do a giveaway for showing up live with us as a thank you for being here and listening to me uh, go on and on. So if you're here and you make any comment, you're entered to win a $100 gift card. Anything counts. Hi, whatever. We just love you guys being here. Hey, Heather. Hey, Laura. Hey, Rebecca. Morning to you. Hey, Nada. I'm so happy to have y'all. Hey, Paula. Such a fun group today. Yay. Thank you guys for being here. Okay. So part of this conversation came up because I think I said this in the email today, but I was having this conversation with a client recently. And we were talking about something, and it was so obvious to me in what she said that she was not holding this mindset at all. And Haley, and I said to her, like, okay, my one goal for us is for you to like get in this mindset and for you to nail this. And she kind of was like surprised, I think, that I would say, like, this is our focus, this is my one goal. But it really is true. And I feel like if you've done this before, if you've been in this, you will know once I say what the thing is, like how difficult it is to run a really successful business with this mindset. And I have another client that's like kind of going through this right now too. So anyway, just to say, like, I think there's something in the air about this, and we're gonna get into it. Hey, Heather. Hey, Al, good to see you. Okay, so the mindset is this: there is no one that knows about your business or clients more than you. Like, you have to believe in your gut, in your bones, like in the deepest part of you, no one knows your business or your clients. And I think especially that potentially better than you. And I'm going to go into a lot of what this looks like, but I feel like most people are running a business going, someone else knows how to market to my clients better than me. Someone else knows what I should be doing in my business better than me. Right. And our whole industry is almost built on that idea that someone else knows better than you. And I'm not saying there aren't better marketers than you or, more effective CEOs. There are definitely better marketers than me. There are definitely more effective CEOs than me. I could go on and on about that. But no one knows a lit up life like I do. No one knows a lit up life's clients or audience like I do. And I think so few people, hey guys, and that is so true. Hey, Michelle. I think so few people really land that thought for themselves or really operate from that place. I think the majority of people in our space go, someone else knows better, and I have to find out what they know, right? Or I have to hire them to run my marketing because they're better marketers than me. Or I have to hire an agency to create all of this for me because they're better at it than I am. And I just feel like that gets so many people stuck because they give away their power over and over and over to people who don't know their business or clients as well as them. And it's kind of that simple. It's like this endless cycle of like, I don't think I know them as well as I should. And so I give that power to someone else. And then they, of course, can't know them as well as I do. And so then they underperform. And then we're in this constant cycle. And I'm like jumping from thing to thing to thing, or program to program to program, or agency to agency, or coach to coach, or whatever. Right. And I'm forgetting that the magic is me and what I know about my people and my business. And so I feel like one of the most obvious ways people do this, we'll go through a bunch of. Paula said, I agree. I know best. Yes. Oh, tell us what you're contemplating. Obviously if it's super long, don't feel like you have to type a ton of stuff if that's really annoying. But if you have like a nugget for us, I would love to hear. But I think, so one of the most obvious ways people do this, and we'll talk about a few different versions, but one of the most obvious ways people do this, and this was that client I was talking to her, I was saying to her, like, this is my goal for you right now, is we outsource our marketing. So we're like, okay, actually, I was talking to somebody else about this recently too, because she was like outsourcing a lot of her marketing. And I was like, why are you outsourcing so much of that? You're so good at it. And she was like, yeah, but I just don't have time. I'm like, you have time to market. You need to get other stuff off your plate if you really don't have time to market. Like, why are we not getting these other small tasks off your plate? And she was like, oh my God, duh. I don't know. I just like, like that just seems like an easy place to outsource. So I think a lot of people outsource their marketing, whether it's to like a VA or a social media manager or yeah, like an agency or whatever. And we think like they will do a better job at growing my account, getting me leads than I will. And I just personally think that that is a really, really tough like belief system to hold. The people that I see do best with outsourcing marketing is because they know their people so well, and they have a really robust way that they translate that information to the social media manager or the agency, right? Or the social media manager or the agency is simply there to repurpose like things that they already have. I was actually I just hired someone new to support with some of our social stuff at A Lit Up Life, just in terms of kind of like posting, moderating, that kind of thing. And she was asking me like, did I want like a full package, or, did I just want her to kind of do some of these like little support tasks? And I was saying to her, like, listen, tell me if you feel differently. You're like the social media manager that's out there right now, right? But I feel like you aren't going to possibly know my people as well as I do right now. Plus, I need to film all of the like whatever content, B-roll, reels, etc. Anyway, like I feel like I'm going to be the most effective at this current juncture. And she was like, I absolutely agree with you. Like she wasn't like, oh no, I could come up with content that's going to grow you in the same way that you could. Right. However, I totally have had that in my business at different points when I wanted to coast. But I think the idea that someone is going to be able to mind read your clients like you and then create content that speaks to them like in their soul, right? That then makes you grow and evolve is so unlikely, you know, unless like they're so specialized into your niche and but then they're probably creating that same content for lots of other people too. So like, but I just appreciated that so much in her, and that she was like, yeah, I see it the same way. Because and honestly, I like hired her on a call, which I almost never do, because I was like, yep, we're aligned in thinking on this. And that's what matters to me. Is that like we're seeing things on the same page, right? Not that anyone can't ever see things differently than me or push back, but like it just really made sense to me. Like, yeah, of course. And she kind of said that to me too. She was like, listen, if you're in a phase where you're like really focused on growth, it should be you. If you want me to come in and like maintain shit, I can absolutely do that for you. And I just appreciated that so much. I have another friend who does have like an agency support her. And she saves exactly no time doing this. And I don't mean this in a bad way. They are so fantastic and they do such an incredible job with her account. But she is still filming, ideating, showing up, going back and forth with them, exchanging information. It's really valuable for her to have that thought partner, that support, that help with some of like the putting it together, execution, like all of that. It's so valuable for her. But if she wants those results, she has to be in it. The idea that we can fully outsource something like this and spend almost none of our time on it, I just think is not real in the way that it used to be anymore, because back to the mindset thing, no one knows your people like you do. And when you take that in, everything gets clear and obvious and changes. Hey, Krista. Hey, Alyssa. Hey, Luz. And I said I've done launches and they were successful. And then I had this looking for someone to make it better, fix me moment, lead gen team, new strategy and whatnot. Yep. But I honestly didn't need more. I needed to follow my gut more without giving my power away. I mean, like nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Right. especially when we get to that certain point, we're like, oh, it's going good. Someone else can do this better, right? And then we outsource, outsource, outsource. And again, there's nothing wrong with outsourcing or delegating or anything like that. But to me, when we start outsourcing, like the absolute ideation of like, this is what my clients need to hear is when things get wonky, right? When we own that piece and outsource the other pieces around it, that's okay. But if you really think that someone knows your client or your business better than you, you're almost always going to fall into a trap of giving them your power, right? So even a coach, like you know your business better than your coach. Your coach can know your business really well. Like for a lot of my clients, I've been with them for 6, 7+ years, right? And they still know their business better than me. They've been working in it every day for 6, 7+ years. I haven't, right? I might talk to them most days. I might connect with them. I might remember that offer we did in 2019 about da, 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 but they still fucking know it better than I do. I am there to help with reflection, guidance, neutrality, support, all of that in a way that they can't do for themselves, right? Because we can't give that to ourselves. But at the end of the day, like they're the ones who know. And I can even tell them, like, in general, this is what I see working in our space, or when I look at data across multiple clients, or when I have conversations across multiple levels in this industry, this is what I see. But they're still the one that knows their business the best, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And I said, sure, but not from a place of I need a fix. Exactly. Exactly. I think that's so true. I think that so many people think like, I don't like the marketing or I don't want to do the marketing or whatever, like to go off that example. And or I need to be doing it way better and have someone come in and fix it. And that's where we get stuck versus being like, well, marketing is just knowing my people really well. And no one can do that, but no one can do that as well as me, right? And Paula said, what do you think of the self-proclaimed gurus who give you unsolicited advice without knowing much of anything about your business? I mean, to me, that's just laughable. It's just a joke. Like, uh, I just can't with that. Like, obviously, listen, on social media, we're all going to give some generic advice because that's the best we can do, right? Like, I can't write to the business of every person, that follows me, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, of course, sometimes we're all going to kind of give unsolicited or more generic advice on like a reel or, quick post in a Facebook group or something like that. But I think, like, one, are we stating it as though it's fact for everyone, no matter what? And two, can we acknowledge that that's just our marketing and are we doing something different in our containers? I think that, yeah, the idea of like, I don't know anything about your business, but I can tell you exactly what you need to do is it's just laughable. It just makes absolutely no sense. That's like being like, I'm your physician and I've never looked at anything in terms of your blood work, your whatever results, anything, and I can tell you exactly what you need to do. Like, of course you can't. You're welcome, Paula. Um, So anyway, marketing is like a huge way that we do this. And I think it used to be easier. So let's talk about that for a second too. I think that when marketing was a lot more, what's the word I want to use? Teaching based, I guess you could say. A lot more like do these things or like teach this thought process. Maybe you could get away with it a little bit more, but I think right now when like the marketing that's doing the best is so specific, so much like gonna make you feel something. So like, that just hits. Like that's the stuff that is so hard to get someone else to think like you. This is such a random example, but I'm going to use it because it's helpful. But Sarah and I were away together this week and we made this reel. We were literally just like laying in bed in the hotel and we were talking about like how great it was that we had that time together. And we made this reel and it said, POV, you realize your husband doesn't actually need to change his motherfucking attitude. You don't actually need to rehome your kid, and you definitely don't need to burn all your no-show socks. You just needed a night in a hotel room and room service with your bestie. This is such a perfect example because these were so specific to things we were literally talking about in that moment. Like, I was like, both of us actually were like, oh yeah, our husbands are actually pretty fucking great. Like, noted. Like sometimes you're like, oh, you're so annoying. And then you get away and you're like, oh, you're pretty wonderful. Um, both of our kids had had like terrible nights of sleep. So we were like, oh my God, we cannot do this. And then we were having this whole debate about socks. So anyway, all that to say is like the level of specificity here, if I handed that off to someone else, they're not having my same experiences. They're not having my same thing, like with my friend. And so it's so hard to translate that. Like they're just taking what they're doing. Like maybe someone else would have that idea because they were with their friend for the weekend, but I wasn't. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like this level of specificity comes from like being really in something that you're sharing personally or something really specific with a client, like this exact conversation where I've just had this conversation with multiple clients. And so I can like go deep in it where like someone that would be creating that for me wouldn't have that, you know? Yeah, said I saw that and I was like, oh my God, this is me. How do they know? Yeah. Oh, and then you saw it was us. Yeah. Like that's literally like what is working on social media right now, right? And I'm not saying it has to be like a post about your bestie or something. Obviously, that was kind of like a random one-off thing, but I'm saying that level of detail is is what's working, right? That level of like I get it in a way that like Chat GPT cannot, well, maybe I should say asterisk cannot yet capture that level of storytelling or that level of like, oh, I just had this conversation with my bestie or a client or whatever, and I'm going to share it. Like that is what is performing right now. And so the idea that someone else knows a better way to capture that, I think is just really difficult. So this client I was talking to about it had been having her VA slash social media manager do most of her marketing for her. And I had really challenged her to like do a couple herself. And guess what happened? The like couple that she did for herself popped in a way that nothing has popped for her in a while. And it was just really helpful for her to see like, oh, that worked because I know my people really well. And then I just put that into like, words on a B-roll thing or whatever. And that took off, right? In a way that like, and what I was kind of saying to her is like, how would your person have known that? How could she have replicated that? How could she have taken that level of specificity, right? And it's like she could if you spend a lot of time voice noting her and going back and forth on this and. I mean, there could be so many things, but most people outsource it going, I want to step back, right? Or someone else knows better than me. The only way I would outsource it if I was like, there are just pieces I don't want to do, but nobody knows better than me. So I still have to be very involved in it to make that work. Right. Um, yeah. And I said I wouldn't outsource marketing. It's relationship with my people. Totally. And again, I think it's not to say you never could. I think potentially there could be ways to do that. But I mean, I really feel the same. Like I've probably done that slightly more in different seasons where like, when I was like had a very, very small child or was more in like coasting. But if I like want to be out there growing, making sales in it, like that is not what I'm going to be outsourcing the most. Maybe the pieces of it, like I'm not just saying maybe like the tech or, maybe even some of the ideation or whatever, but it's got to be like a joint thing, right? Yeah. And like Lacey thinks she writes all her stuff, but her VA posts, right? Same. Like I definitely have social media support in terms of like posting, community management, stories that I've approved, different things like that. But like the essence of like, this is our content is always me because I'm the one that's on 5 hours of coaching calls that day or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's so crazy to think that I could spend whatever, how many hours of calls do I have a week? Let's say, I don't know, 17 or something. I'm just making that up. I'm not sure the exact, but I think it's probably around 17 hours of calls a week, right? And what my brain knows and like can hold from doing 17 hours of calls that week, no one can touch that, right? Like, I just think it's so important to land that. No one can touch that. Yes, I can share ideas with someone else or whatever. And again, there's like a place to take that. But like thinking that you could be on however many you're on 17, 10, 4, whatever hours of calls, hours of support for your people, and that someone else still knows better is kind of crazy, right? But it's this thing that our industry breeds in us, I think, of like, there's always someone better at marketing that's doing better, that's popping more, that's getting better results. And so instead of being like, how do I upgrade my skill set around that? We go, how can someone else just tell me what to do better? Right. Or instead of being like, how do I test and see what's working here or what's not? We're like, someone else should tell me how to get it right. And I just think that that is the hardest place to be in business because you're spending all this time kind of like information gathering in the work, all of that. And then it's like it cuts off, right? Like anytime someone's saying to me, like, oh, I'm feeling frustrated because I'm on this many calls and it's like getting in the way of my marketing, I'm like, your calls should be fodder for your marketing all the time. If you're not seeing those as connected, you're totally missing the point, right? Like you being on however many calls that week should mean that marketing gets done like fast as can be because you know what your people are talking about that week. You know what they're asking. You know what's coming up for them. Like it really should be such an easy translation then. Now, I know we all have other stuff. And so that's like a whole other sidebar of this. Of course, we all have stuff around what it means to show up or getting visible or all of those other things. But the truth is, like, someone else doing it doesn't really take that away. Like, you might think, oh, if someone else was doing all my content, I wouldn't feel so weird about it. But I don't think that's true. I had a client who was having someone else do some of her content and she showed it to me and I was like, how do you feel about this content? And she was like, I feel embarrassed as fuck right now. And I'm like, yeah, like it doesn't make it better. You know what I mean? And obviously that content could have been better. But my point is, like, if you feel weird about showing up, you're still going to feel weird about showing up if someone else is doing it for you. So it's like there are dragons we're going to have to slay anyway. But you're often making it so much harder by still thinking that someone else knows your people or your content or your audience or your business more than you. I also think people do this all the time with like like team stuff. I guess I'll say it like that, where it's like you're the only one typically in your business who has the view of all sides. So like I'm the only one at a lit up life who is on coaching calls and is in the back end and right. And so I also see clients sometimes do this with team stuff where they're like, well, my team thinks we should blank. And it's like, okay, that's great. We always want to be taking feedback from our team. We always want to be taking advice, but like you still know best. Like, are you controlled by that? Or are you like, I really appreciate that from their perspective? What like insert thing? Like, it seems like we should slow down on this, or it seems like maybe this is too soon to do an event or whatever. But like, if you know from the business owner perspective that like there's a really important reason to do that, there is a specific why behind that or whatever, like you have to be willing to be like, I am still the expert here and push back, right? And it doesn't mean push back on team in a way of like, you have to be overloaded and burnt out or anything like that, but to be like, hey, this is really important to me to make this happen. So how can we do that if we need to hire someone else or if we whatever, instead of just being like, oh, okay, you're probably right. You probably know better. Right. We just do that in so many ways. And whether it's content or team or with a coach, which we can talk about that too, like it's just so easy to fall into that trap. And I think sometimes we want to fall into that trap because as a business owner, it's really hard to hold the knowledge that like you are the one who it all rests on. And I think a lot of times our brains are like, wouldn't it be great if it was someone else? Right. And organic and my content has never performed as well at times when I've outsourced it. Just remembering one time I had someone editing reels for me for 6 months and how awful it was when there kept being basic typos on the reel. Oh, yeah, I just think like I think it's true. I hate to say that. Um, and hopefully there will be a time where that feels different, but I think the way that content is right now and what's performing, it is almost always going to have better performance and results when you're very, very in it. And like, oh, the typos on the reel would kill me. I'm just seeing you. Hey, Monica, good to see you, friend. Sarah said I had to have this conversation with team members like this recently. Right. Like I was just talking to a friend about this too, and she was kind of in a similar position, and just kind of reminding her, like, no one knows your business better than you. No one has built this business but you. Like, I just think that that's so important. Hi, Elisa. Good to have you. Checking in, but always here for a good mindset chat. Yes. So I think we should be honest about it. Like, I am someone who definitely believes in repurposing and all that stuff still, but even that I've pulled back on quite a bit in terms of trying to get more. I mean, we'll repurpose from like Instagram to Facebook or vice versa or whatever, but I mean, even having team repurpose as much of it, I've pulled back on a bit, to be honest, um, because I just see that it's worth my time. You know, it's not like I couldn't, I absolutely could. But in terms of like when I look at the data and the results, like the results change quite a bit when I put that time into it. So it's worth it for me to figure out how to put that time into it, you know? Um, Morgana said, I'm going through a huge pivot right now and starting all new social media and have definitely been having that feeling of if only someone else could do that, but I know they can't. Yep. I hear you in that. Amanda said, I agree. I write the Facebook posts. My team repurposes it to email and Instagram, but still my voice message. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So I think like there just is like a bit of a reworking, but it really comes down to like, do you believe you're the expert in your business and in your people? If you are sitting here and listening to this and you're like, I cannot honestly say I feel like an expert in my people, like that is it for you. Like that is it. Like there is nothing more valuable in your business than holding that as true. Because for me, that's how I don't give that much of a shit about like what changes and what moves and what algorithms doing what and blah, 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 blah. And like if TikTok's going to get shut down or not going to get shut down or whatever, because I'm like, the thing that I have that I can own is no one knows my people like I do. Like that will translate to any platform that comes next, any algorithm that changes, anything. Like that is what no one can touch or take away from me when I fully own it, right? And that is, I think, the magic that so many of us leave on the table in favor of thinking that someone else knows better or someone else is better at it. And again, there are a million people, a million plus, let's be real, who are better on Instagram than me, but there is no one who knows my people like I do. And I think when we can really land that plane, we feel like our marketing is worth it. It makes a difference. When we're like, oh my gosh, there's so many people who are so much better at Instagram than us, then it feels like it's not worth it, or like, why wouldn't we outsource it? And that's why. Because yes, there are probably a million people with like more aesthetic things, better video, better editing, like snappier hooks, whatever, but no one knows my people like I do, right? Yeah, marketing feels like a conversation. I love that. Shannon said, I believe I'm the expert in my business and my people, and I'm always, or at least often, forced back to beginner's mind of translating it into marketing. Totally. I think what's helpful there, though, like on a broad scale, is like when we believe that, then it feels easier in our minds to translate it, right? So, like when I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on reels, like the one thing I didn't feel like I was a beginner at was figuring out what my people needed to hear. I was like, well, I know what they need to hear. I just have to figure out how it fits this type of platform or whatever. And that's the easiest part by far. The hardest part is like really knowing your audience and people. When you have that, the easiest part is like, how does that fit on TikTok versus how does that fit on Instagram or whatever? Um, and and so I think that's helpful to see is that we've often gone through the hardest parts, but we're still making it so complicated. Or it's making our mindset even worse because we're like, oh, this is still not landing. What's wrong with me? You know? Tiani said, I love this conversation. We forget we are the expert in our business and often we are the client we are looking for. I know this is true for me. I love that. Beautifully said. Love it. And landing the plane. The thing that I know better than anyone is my people. Yes, yes. Rebecca said, this is such an interesting mindset shift from growing your business by staying strictly in your zone of genius versus growing your skill set in an area where you feel weaker, because that's what marketing is requiring right now. I'll speak for myself. It's an area where I feel weaker or don't want to spend as much time. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think like the zone of genius is like knowing your people really well, but you're going to have to continue to grow and evolve and translate the way you express that. Right. But I think that most people have resistance to that because they think, well, I don't know marketing or I'm not as good at that or whatever. And I think that's why this mindset shift means so much is because if you're like, not about marketing or whatever, it's about, do I know my people? If I know my people really well, then like it's so easy. Like that real example I used that Sarah and I did earlier, right? Like we set up our phone, took 3 seconds, right? We took like 5 minutes of clips while we ate. And then we put a thing over it that like we already were feeling and knowing like this whole thing was like 10 seconds of work almost. Do you know what I mean? And so it like objectively, none of that's hard. Like setting up the camera, not hard, right? Like eating the room service while said camera was set up, not hard. Um, Thinking of like, what have we been talking about? Not hard. Typing that onto a reel, not hard. Like objectively, none of that is hard. But I think that we just get into such a spin of like, that's what I'm not good at. Instead of being like, oh, it's pretty easy to translate it to these other things because objectively, none of those are hard. What I have to believe is that I'm great at marketing because I know my people. Does that make sense? Um, yes, good level set. Fit the message we know to the frame. Yep, totally that. Um, Excuse me. I used to struggle with reels a lot. Not struggle. I mean, I never did them, but I used to be like, oh, I'm not doing all that. One, because I was just in a season where I like didn't want to, didn't need to, which is like okay, by the way, too. So like that's worth noting. Like you might have times in your business where you're like, that's just not my top focus right now. That's fine. But also, I think one of the things that I really was like made me resistant to getting into it is like I felt like I had to like dance and like do all this stuff that is so inherently not me. And I was like, oh, that feels so not me. Like that's not going to translate. But I think the thing that's evolved so quickly with like reels and social in general is that there is just so many ways to do it. It's like when TikTok was just a dancing platform, it was like, meh. But now it's like there are every kind of video you can imagine on TikTok. Like you can find a way to do it that feels good to you. And so I think that that's just a helpful frame too. That really changed for me when I was like, okay, well, like nothing about filming 5 seconds of B-roll or lip syncing something feels bad for me. So like interesting, like I can lean into that, right? And not just that I like dancing on reels. Someone else is like, the funnest part for me is dancing on reels. Like it doesn't matter. Like there's no right way. And I think that's what's so cool about it now is like you can translate it in 100 different ways. Like I could literally take a video of me being like, and that's the like, do you know what I mean? Like it's like that was the whole post. As long as you're putting something on it that your people really resonate with. Another real example that I wanted to give you guys, because I thought this was a helpful one too, is this one. Where is it? Okay, I said this is literally just me going like this at the camera. But I said a thing that I know my people are thinking that I'm having conversations with them around. And I said, very unpopular opinion. The biggest problem in our industry right now is that everyone wants the results with no trade-offs, and everyone that's selling no trade-offs can't deliver on the results. That is such a specific statement. It is so specific to like my people and things I talk about all the time. And of course that reel does great. It's got what 78.7 that or 78.7K, 78,000, let's say that 78,000 views, right? But it's like objectively everything about that was easy. I typed and I hit share. The only thing that's hard about that is knowing what to fucking say on it, right? And so I think that that's just the mindset that we really have to pull in is like all of this shit is easy. The knowing what to say is the kicker, and it's the only thing that matters right now. Obviously, like there's things like visual hooks make a difference, different things like that. I had on a cute shirt, like right, small things matter. But what really matters is, are you saying a thing that's captivating and that you know your people are like, oh, fuck yeah, she said that, or oh, that was me, or oh, it's exactly what I needed to hear. Like when you land that, everything else lands. And so that's really the point I want to make today is like, if you can take in that mindset where The rest is fucking easy. The one thing you need is to know your people deeply. And if you're on calls with them every week, if you're engaging with them every week, there's no way you don't. You just have to start seeing that as your most valuable skill set and translating that, you know? Um, Rebecca said it makes total sense. I've been coached in the past to hire out everything you don't want to do, but that is not always the case. Owning a business is growing yourself. Yeah, I mean, I think there's such a fine line there, right? Like most business owners, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Like if I was given the choice between like make reels all day or like go do whatever you want to do, I would pick go do whatever I want to do. But I don't hate making reels or anything like that. It's just not like this is something I deeply, desperately desire to do in my business. And so I think there's just such a fine line. Like if you're like, I will never, ever, ever make reels, like I'm just flat out not going to do it, then yeah, hiring that out is probably going to give you better results than not doing it. Right. Objectively, I think that's true. But if you're like, well, it's just not my favorite thing to do, does that mean you should hire it out? No. And honestly, maybe it will become one of your more favorite things to do the more you do it. Like that's what I find is like at the beginning, it was probably one of my like least favorite things to do. But the more I've done it and kind of found my way there, the more enjoyment I have from it. So I think it's just so depends. And I think like that advice of just like you always hire out anything that you don't desperately want to do is like a little short-sighted and not nuanced. So I think, yeah, I think it depends. And I also, again, I think kind of depends on what content is working then too. Like there's some stuff that's easier to what's it called? Source than others. Like I think when we were writing content that's like, whatever, I'm just trying to think of like an example, you know, five, ways to eat healthier this week. And it was almost like this chat GPT asked kind of like guru teachy thing. It's probably easier than like a personal video where you're like talking about something much more deeper, like so it depends obviously, but ultimately like you being in there, your personality being in there, I just think it matters so much right now, and I just think it's helpful to see that. And I think excuse me, even if you are outsourcing that, I think it's still helpful to say, like, you have final take, you have final say. If it's not something you would explicitly say, or it's not something that you have genuinely just had a conversation with a client about or whatever, it probably needs to get redone. So it's like, even if you're like, I want to hire out, fine, but just make sure you're still really in it. Like if a bunch of stuff is going out without you having looked at it and stuff, again, I think you're probably just going to be in a position where you're probably not going to be getting the results you could be, which is like maybe okay. Again, I've had seasons in my business where I was like, I don't care if my Instagram grows. I really don't give a shit. It's the last thing I'm worried about. I don't need reach right now. Totally fine. But I think where we get confused is thinking that we should be able to do that and then they'll, grow us to the moon kind of thing. Sarah said, right now I'm weighing the benefits trade-offs of, of how much energy I want to put into the team account. So like your version of Dateable MM account and my own account where the majority of business comes in. Yeah, I think that's tough too. I mean, what we've started to do very recently with Dateable is do more like collab posts. Because I do think like social takes a lot right now in terms of like showing up, engaging, creation, etc. And so like I just know for me, I can't full-time run two accounts. And I know when we were kind of just pumping out content at Dateable, it wasn't doing its best. Like it needs that extra like thought process and that extra like, you know what I mean? That like only um you can bring kind of thing. So what I would say to that is like, I would look at your numbers and stuff, but I think the more you can kind of like kill two birds with one stone with stuff like that, the better. You might want to check out my friend. Let me see if I can do it on here. Oh, no, if I can't. It's not letting me type right now, but my best friend Sarah does a really good job of this. She's at Sarah_Wiles, Wiles. And so she has like her main account and then she has like her business account as well. And she just like collapsed most of it. And I think she's a really good example. I mean, she doesn't club all of it, but I think she's a great example of like finding the overlap and making that work with both. So that's something I would look at too. But yeah, I think like on the vein of like no one knows this better than I do, running two accounts can be really tough. Like I don't obviously say that from personal experience, especially depending on like how much other like one-on-one time you're doing, how much other support you're giving, capacity, all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it can be a lot, but I do think that's a good way around it. Oh, amazing. Thanks, Crystal. Crystal just dropped Sarah's link there too. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this is a good takeaway. If you're like, I don't know that I have this mindset right now, I really think this is like the best work you can be doing. It's also the work that's going to prevent you from spending a lot of stupid money in your business on people that aren't going to grow you in the way you want to grow, or on programs that you don't need because you really think someone else knows better than you, that kind of stuff. Like it really, really is going to be a great thing in terms of empowerment, but also in terms of discernment, right? So, like, what actually makes sense here? Like, am I hiring this because I feel like someone has to, you know my messaging so much better than me, or someone has to be able to run my marketing so much better than me? If that's what you're doing, red flag, stop. If you're like, oh, I really know my people, but I need whatever, more support on learning real strategy. Fine, that's great. There's no problem with that, right? But it's just like noticing what place you're coming from, because that's when you're going to make a great investment versus an investment where you're like, well, that didn't go how I thought. Or be in an investment where you're like, I've pretty much outsourced all of my success to someone else. And now I'm feeling really anxious and uncomfortable and it's not working how I want it to work. Like you really want to feel like your success is on you. And again, sometimes that can be heavy. Sometimes as a business owner, like we don't want to feel like that. And so there's obviously work around that. And there's stuff to feel like, how do I feel held and supported in all that I'm holding? But that's the work more than it is, okay, how do I get the idea that like it's on me off my plate? Like, no, it's more like, how do I come to terms with that in a way that feels really empowering? So I hope that helps. If you guys have more questions on that or other things you'd like me to dive into there, let me know. Happy to go there. And I hope you guys have a beautiful Monday. Remember, if you comment, we will give away a $100 gift card tomorrow. And I just really appreciate y'all showing up and I hope you have a beautiful week. Bye, guys.